She was only meant to serve the queen, but one glance from the king turned her life into a battlefield of betrayal, power, and shattered bloodlines. When two sisters fight for a crown neither asked for, only one walks away with her soul intact. How far would you go to protect love from your own family? If you are new here, then please subscribe this channel and show thumbs up by liking the video. Now let's move to this wonderful story. The sky above the village estate was a soft gray, touched with golden light. It was the kind of morning where the air felt still, as if even the wind paused to listen. Inside the estate's great hall, candles flickered and flowers lined the long wooden tables. It was the wedding day of Marianne, the younger daughter of Lord Walrick. Marianne sat quietly as her mother, Lady Enra, fastened the last pearl into her dark hair. Her hands trembled slightly, not from fear but from the weight of a new life about to begin. She was marrying Thomas Farlan, a kind-hearted soldier with gentle eyes and a strong sense of duty. They had no riches, no title, but Marianne never cared for those things. Selva, the elder sister, stood behind her watching. She smiled softly, but behind that smile was a mix of pride and something quieter, something that didn't speak but sat heavy in her chest. Selva had always been the one people expected more from. She was clever, sharp-tongued, and beautiful in a way that made people stop and stare. But today, it was Marianne's name everyone whispered. In the courtyard, guests arrived dressed in their finest. The sound of laughter echoed through the halls as music floated in the air. Darren, the brother, teased Marianne gently before the ceremony. "You're the youngest, yet somehow the first to leave us," he joked. "Then hurry and marry yourself, brother," Marianne replied with a smile. But while the family celebrated, Lord Walrick and his brother-in-law, Lord Colin, met in the study with hushed voices and serious faces. The door was closed, the fire crackling low. "The king's loss has changed everything," Colin said. "His grief is deep," Walrick replied, "and deep grief seeks distraction." They were speaking of King Aldred. Only weeks ago, the Queen had lost their newborn son, leaving the kingdom once again without a male heir. Since then, the king had rarely spoken, rarely smiled. Colin, ever the strategist, saw it as an opening. "You have daughters of age," Colin continued. "One, already catching eyes, the other, full of potential. Selva could rise higher," Walrick admitted. "But it seems fate favors Marianne." As if summoned by fate, word came that the king would attend the wedding. No one expected it. No one truly believed it. But soon, horses thundered through the gates and royal banners snapped in the wind. The king had arrived. A silence fell over the crowd as King Aldred stepped into the hall. Tall, quiet, and dressed in a deep blue cloak, he moved like a shadow of himself. Grief had carved lines into his face, but his presence still held weight. People bowed, murmuring their respect. He barely nodded in return. Then he saw her. Marianne stood beneath an arch of ivy, her hands folded, her head bowed slightly in prayer before the vows. When she looked up, their eyes met for the first time. It lasted only a moment. A simple glance, but something passed between them, something unseen and unspoken. Selva noticed. After the ceremony, as guests danced and drank, the king sat at the long table, quiet but watching. Marianne tried not to notice his gaze. Selva, however, did not look away. Her eyes tracked every moment, every breath. She knew the world of power, and she saw what her sister did not. "He looked at you like a man waking from sleep," Selva whispered to Marianne when they were alone. "He looked through you, not at you." "Please," Marianne replied, "don't say such things. Today is for joy." But the joy was already changing. Later that night, when the laughter faded and the torches burned, Lord Walrick knocked on Selva's chamber door. He stepped inside without waiting. "It was supposed to be you," he said flatly. "Father?" Selva frowned. "You were meant to be noticed," he said again. "But now the king sees Marianne." Selva stood silent. "We must act quickly," he continued. "Colin agrees. This is our moment. If one of you gains the king's favor, our family rises. Our name becomes something history remembers. And you want me to chase his eyes? Selva asked. I want you to take back what should be yours. Down the hall, Marianne sat with her new husband. She held his hand and smiled softly, unaware of the plans being made around her. She believed in love. She believed in quiet lives and happy endings. But outside their door, the world was shifting, from the castle to the countryside, from whispered plans to stolen glances. A game had begun, and Marianne had no idea she was already the prize. A month after the wedding, a letter arrived sealed with the royal crest. Marianne read the words slowly, her fingers trembling. She had been chosen to serve as one of Queen Leandria's ladies-in-waiting. Thomas stood beside her, his brow furrowed in concern. We should stay here, he said softly. This is not the life you wanted. Marianne looked up at him. I don't want to leave, but if we refuse, your name will be forgotten, and Father will never forgive us. Thomas didn't answer. He simply nodded and held her close. Soon, trunks were packed and horses saddled. Marianne and Thomas were on their way to the royal court, along with her brother Darren, who had been given a post at the stables. Selva watched from the balcony of the family estate, her eyes narrow and unreadable. It should have been me, she whispered. But no one heard her. The court was dazzling. Stone, halls taller than the trees back home, glowing with candlelight and echoing with secrets. Marianne moved through them like a ghost, quiet and careful. Queen Leandria welcomed her with polite words but cold eyes. You are lovely, the queen said, touching Marianne's cheek. Too lovely, perhaps. Marianne lowered her gaze. I only wish to serve you well, your grace. The queen smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Within days, whispers floated through the court. They said the king had begun leaving books and flowers at Marianne's door. They said he smiled more when she was near. They said too much. And Marianne said nothing. Thomas, now forced to attend late council meetings, walked the palace halls with a heavy heart. He saw the way people looked at his wife, some with jealousy, some with hunger, few with kindness. One evening, after a royal feast, King Aldred passed Marianne in the corridor. His voice was low and tired. Do you walk alone so often? He asked. It helps me think, Marianne replied. He stopped and looked at her for a long moment. You remind me of something I lost a long time ago. She didn't know what to say, so she bowed and stepped away. Behind the pillars, Selva watched. She had arrived at court days ago, claiming to visit her sister. But her true purpose was hidden. She came dressed in fine fabrics, her hair perfectly braided, her voice sweet like honey. She studied everything, how the king moved, how the queen spoke, how Marianne acted. You've learned quickly, she told Marianne one morning. I don't want to learn these things, Marianne replied. Then you'll lose before you even understand the game, Selva said with a smile. As the days passed, Marianne grew more distant from Thomas. They spoke less, they sat in silence longer, and though she loved him, a strange coldness was growing between them. Queen Leandria invited Marianne to her chamber one evening. She poured wine and offered fruit. Her tone was calm, but there was ice in her voice. You walk carefully, the queen said, but no step goes unnoticed. Do you know what happens to those who take from a queen? I have taken nothing, Marianne whispered. Not yet, the queen replied. But even silence can become a weapon. Marianne left the chamber shaken. She did not return to her room, but instead walked the gardens. She found Darren feeding the horses. This place isn't made for people like us, she said. No, he agreed. It's made for wolves. Later that night, Marianne received another letter from the king. He asked to meet her after the ball. She sat holding the note, heart pounding. She didn't know what answer to give. At the same time, Selva dressed, in silver and blue, ready to dance. She painted her lips and told her reflection, Tonight he will see me. But the king only had eyes for Marianne. During the ball, he offered his hand, and they danced. Whispers grew louder. Selva stood alone, her smile fading with each turn of their steps. Afterward, Marian tried to return to her chamber, but a maid waited at the door. "His Majesty requests your presence," the girl said. Inside the king's private study, candles burned low. He stood by the window, his voice soft. "You are different from the others," he said. "I am no one special," Marian replied. "That is what makes you special," he said. He reached for her hand. She did not pull away. When he kissed her, it was gentle and sad. In the morning, Thomas sat in silence as Marian avoided his eyes. She wanted to speak, but no words came. Outside, Lord Walrick and Lord Colin received word of the king's favor. Their plan was working. The family rose higher in name and power. Thomas was named to the royal council. Marianne was praised by noblewomen. Wealth followed, but joy did not. Selva sat at her window, writing a letter to her mother. "I see the crown slipping toward Marianne," she wrote. "But I will not let it rest on her head. Not yet." As the sun rose, the game continued, and no one knew just how far it would go. The palace bells rang at sunrise. Servants moved quickly through the halls. Fresh flowers were placed in vases. The kitchens boiled with heat and work. Something important had happened. Something everyone whispered about, but dared not say out. Loud Marian had given birth to a son. Queen Leandria stayed in her chambers silent, her face pale. She had not spoken to the king in days. Her eyes stared into the fire as if searching for something long gone. Meanwhile, King Aldred held Marian's child in his arms with a soft smile. He looked at the boy's tiny fingers and said quietly, "He will be strong." Marian lay in bed, pale but peaceful. She had done what the queen could not. The court began to treat her not as a maid of honor, but as something more. Gifts came daily. Gold, silk, precious stones. Lord Walrick received new land. Lord Colin was granted a title. Thomas was given a grand office at court. The family's name was rising like never before. But for Marianne, joy mixed with fear. She saw the queen's pain. She saw Thomas growing more distant. And she saw her sister watching from the shadows. Selva had returned to the palace dressed in soft green robes and a voice full of kindness, but Marian felt the cold behind her words. Selva now walked with confidence, her time spent abroad changing her. She spoke with poets and debated with scholars. Courtiers gathered around her, laughing at her wit and praising her grace. One afternoon, Marian sat with her child beneath the garden trees. Selva approached, her smile careful. "He's beautiful," Selva said. "Thank you," Marian replied, keeping her eyes on the baby. "You look tired," Selva added. "Does the crown already weigh so heavy?" Marian looked up. "There is no crown. I am not queen." "Not yet," Selva said, then stood and walked away. The king, too, had started to notice Selva. He would stop and speak to her more often. His laughter returned when she was near. She spoke to him about books, about faith, about the stars. He listened. Marianne saw it. Her heart ached, but she said nothing. She knew better than to chase the wind. One night, a celebration was held in honor of the child. Candles lit every hall. Music played. Guests danced in circles. Selva wore a gown of gold and stood beside the king. Marianne, still weak from birth, watched from a distance. Darren approached and offered her his arm. "He's drifting, sister." "I know," she said. "Do you want him back?" "I don't think he was ever truly mine." Later, Marianne visited her son's room. She held his small hand and whispered a lullaby. Outside the door, Thomas listened quietly. He missed her, but he no longer knew how to reach her. She had crossed into a world he could never follow. The next morning, Selva visited Marianne's chamber. She did not knock. "I want to speak plainly," she said. "Go ahead," Marianne replied. "I want the crown." "Then take it," Marianne said softly. "But no, it comes with a price." "I'm willing to pay," Selva replied. Marianne nodded. "Then you'll have it." That same evening, King Aldred visited Selva's room. They talked for hours. She told him of her time in foreign courts, of things she had learned. He listened closely, drawn to her spirit. He gave her a gift, a silver ring once meant for his late son. She kissed his hand and said, "I will not waste your hope." Soon Marian saw the change. The king came to her less. He spent his days with Selva, laughing, riding, planning. Marianne held her child and felt the silence grow, but she did not cry. Instead, she found peace in small things, the warmth of her son, the breeze through the trees, the kindness of old friends. She began writing stories in her notebook, stories of women who survived storms. When the king finally spoke to her again, it was with softness and distance. "You've been brave," he said. "I had no other choice. I will always care for you, but not love," Marian said, finishing the sentence for him. He nodded and walked away. In the following days, it was announced Selva would become queen. The court buzzed with excitement. Some praised her charm, others whispered warnings. On the night before the announcement, Marian stood outside the palace chapel. Selva found her there. "You never wanted power," Selva said. "No," Marian replied, "but I wanted peace." "Do you hate me?" Marian shook her head. "You're still my sister?" Selva looked at her for a long time. For a moment, something like guilt passed through her eyes. But she said nothing more. The next day, banners were hung. Horns were sounded. The court celebrated. Selva wore a crown and smiled as if nothing could ever break her. But far from the crowd, Marianne sat with her son beneath the garden trees. She held him close and whispered a story in his ear. And in that moment, far from thrones and golden halls, she finally felt free. The crown sat heavy on Selva's head, not just in weight but in silence. After her rise to queen, she was praised in public but whispered about in private. The courtiers smiled to her face, yet mocked her behind walls. No matter how finely she dressed or how clever her words, she felt their eyes judging her every step. King Aldred seemed pleased for a time, but soon he grew distant again. The joy that once sparked between them began to fade. Selva tried to bring him close with music, with laughter, with long nights of conversation. But his heart drifted, and his eyes wandered. One day Selva stood by the palace window and saw him walking with a young woman named Leonora. They laughed. They walked slowly. And he did not look back. Something in Selva cracked. That night, she woke with pain in her stomach. Servants rushed to her aid. But the court healer gave her the news no queen wanted to hear. She had lost the child. She told no one, not even the king. She lied, saying she had a dream that made her cry out. But Marianne saw through her. She found her sister pale and shaking in the hallway the next morning. "You lost it, didn't you?" Marianne asked softly. Selva turned away. "It doesn't matter. I'll try again. And if there's no next time, then I'll create one. I have to." A week later, Marianne discovered Selva's plan. She had told the king she was still pregnant. Marianne begged her to speak the truth. "You're playing with fire," Marianne warned. "You played once too," Selva replied. "This is my turn." Marianne couldn't stay silent. She rushed to their brother Darren, who pleaded with Selva to stop before it was too late. But she refused. She said she had come too far to lose everything now. Then came the turning point. Lady Leonora, unaware of Selva's lie, spoke to the king about how the queen should rest more in her pregnancy. The king, confused, summoned the royal healer to check on the unborn child. The truth was revealed. There was no child. The king's face went cold. He stood, eyes locked on Selva. "You lied," he said. "You used my pain." Selva fell to her knees. "I was afraid," she whispered. "I didn't want to lose you." "You never had me," he said. He ordered her arrested. The same courtiers who once praised her now turned their backs. She was taken to the palace tower, guarded by soldiers who said nothing and felt nothing. When Marianne heard the news, she went to the king. She fell to her knees and begged him for mercy. "She's still my sister," Marianne said. "She was lost, not evil." King Aldred looked at her long and hard. "She betrayed this crown. And yet you wear it," Marianne replied. "What makes you better?" He said nothing. Marianne visited Selva in the tower. Her sister looked tired and broken. I came to say goodbye, Marian said. You must be happy. No, Marian said. I never wanted this ending. Selva's eyes filled with tears. I thought if I had everything, I'd be loved. Love doesn't come from crowns, Marian whispered. The next day, the guards brought Selva to the hall. The king stood waiting. Beside him, the royal council. The room was silent. You may live, the king said, but you are no longer queen. He stripped her of her title and sent her away from court. Marian took her son and returned to the countryside. She left behind the palace, the court, and the crown. Thomas joined her, hoping to rebuild what they once had. They lived simply, far from gossip and gold. Selva disappeared from the world's eye. It was said she went to live in a quiet village where she worked with her hands and spoke little of the past. Years later, Marian's daughter, Elaine, sat by the fire, listening to her mother's stories. Marian spoke gently, her voice like the wind through leaves. Once there were two sisters, she began. One dreamed of love and the other of power. Both were brave, both were broken, but in the end only one found peace. Elaine smiled. Which one? Marian only said, You'll have to decide. The past did not fade. It shaped them. But from it, Marian learned a simple truth, that kindness is greater than ambition, and that loyalty can outlive even a broken heart. And in that quiet corner of the world, far from the noise of thrones and titles, peace finally found them.